Welcome to Smart Life Forum. As we all know, it's now Silicon Valley Health Institute. But you know, old habits die hard. I'm so used to it, Smart Life Forum. We're going to start as normal with an open forum, asking if anyone has questions about their health or the health of a client or a family or a friend, a problem that you want to ask the audience in general, and then whoever wants to answer the question will choose somebody. Does anyone have a question or a health concern that they would like to ask about?
Hi, my name is Dolly, and I recently discovered that I have a high cholesterol, and also the triglycerides are very high, so I need some advice.
May we ask what high cholesterol is?
Let's see, 270 is the total, and about 300 are the triglycerides.
Side effects. Does anybody want to answer that one?
Yes.
I heard two people, someone behind me and...
Hi, I'm Steve Fowkes. I'm the scientific advisor to this forum. There's a lot of misunderstandings about cholesterol. So the first thing I would tell you is not to panic about cholesterol. So people used to think that the ideal range was between 160 and 200. But now they're realizing that for neurodegenerative conditions, it's much higher than that. And they're setting new ranges of well above 200, maybe even as high as 240. So I wouldn't worry about the cholesterol number per se in terms of the total cholesterol. I'd worry about whether the cholesterol was oxidized or was not oxidized, and that's a measurement that they don't really give you. Also, you can look at the HDL, LDL numbers as well. There's all kinds of fractions where people are getting more and more precise about it. We actually had a talk here about sunlight as a way of converting cholesterol into cholesterol sulfate. So getting sun exposure may be one way to bring your cholesterol down. It's not been well studied, but that theory was advanced here in this room. If you are on a statin and you're put on a statin, you're pressured into going on a statin for some reason, by all means, take coenzyme Q10 as a supplement to prevent that CoQ10 deficiency, because the statin blocks cholesterol and it blocks CoQ10, and you don't want to have your CoQ10 blocked.
Yes. Oh, you're a lucky girl today.
So the expert on insulin resistance is Dr. Reven from Stanford, and he gave a talk here, I guess, in the last couple of years. And he said that a simple way to gauge your insulin resistance was to divide the triglyceride number by the HDL number. So, and he said that if you were below 2, you were, 2 is kind of the cutoff point where you're probably not insulin resistant, and if you go, for a woman, 1 is good, triglyceride over HDL. So if you know what your HDL is and you divide your triglyceride by it, that would tell you if you have insulin resistance, which is what Steve's talking about. You're not burning fat in that case.
I forgot to ask everyone to please turn off their cell phones. So if you would mind, please. Are you satisfied with your the answers?
Yeah,
You have enough?
Yeah.
Okay. You can always nab one of us during the break if you want specifics. Anyone else have a question that they'd like addressed or a concern? Doesn't have to be about yourself. 2 people, okay.
Thank you. I have a son who was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5, and we are doing biomedical protocols and healing his body. He has a lot of metabolic issues and he's doing wonderful. But recently I did a blood work, and his vitamin B level is thousands. And when we did organic urine acids, he has some acids really high that indicates that his vitamin B12 is really low, that he is actually deficient in vitamin B. And we are doing B12 shots every third day. And actually, he is now 7. And yeah, it's very, like kind of disbalance what blood showed and what urine showed.
Anyone want to take that on?
Were you here last time?
His Dr. Jerry Cardinal, he was a speaker, but I didn't have a chance to discuss.
I think you can buy the videos this gentleman's making. I think you can buy them. The last time it was about autism.
Yeah,
The speaker spoke all about it. It was great.
that speaker is actually our doctor, but I didn't have a chance to, because I got recently results and I didn't have a chance to discuss about that.
Can she go online and buy that DVD of the last class?
It's online.
It's on, oh, okay. You can go online and catch it.
One of the things that I would point out is that some of the tests for vitamins don't distinguish between human vitamins and microbial vitamins. And so any vitamin that's made by some kind of fermentation process, like B12 or B6, if the manufacturer doesn't purify it sufficiently, the part of the microbial B12 or B6 that won't fit humans can be administered, and then it circulates in the blood, which is tested as being high when it's actually dysfunctional, and can also, in the case of B6, interfere with the natural function of B6. So B6 analogs will produce peripheral neuropathy, which is the same symptom you get from B6 deficiency, even though you might be taking high doses of impure B6 that's actually causing the neuropathy. It's the impurities that are producing the anti-B6 effect and causing the neuropathy. There was a story about that, it was like 30 years ago, where even small doses, like 50 and 100 milligrams of impure B6 were causing peripheral neuropathy, and all the quackbusters were blowing the story all over the news. And at that same time, there were people taking 2 to 4, even 6,000 milligrams of purified B6 that were having no neuropathy whatsoever. So just be concerned about that. Don't trust the metric blood tests. I think the functional tests, looking at organic acids and looking at the way metabolic pathways work, whenever you find that a substance on the front end of a metabolic reaction is high and the one on the other side is low, it means it's broken.
Ditto. You're wanting to answer?
Just a quick follow-up question. I think it's Steve, is that right?
Yes.
Do you prefer the P5P version of B6?
I don't,
Okay,
but if the B6 doesn't do its job, you may need it.
sure.
Is this to address the question?
Chris, there's a B12 transport defect that can cause high methylmalonic acid in the organic acids test, even though your serum B12 levels are high.
Do you know more about that mechanism? Do you know what the transport factor is?
23 and B.
Okay.
He is an honorary doctor.
Yes. Okay. And you had a question, sir, about a health concern? We'll go on to the next question.
Is the Deprenel experiment.
Okay. I've been involved in smart drugs since the 70s and wrote a book about it in the 90s and published Smart Drug News, and so this was something that I had been investigating for a long time. And of all the smart drugs that I've tried, 2 of them, paracetam and Deprenel, are on my favorite smart drugs of choice category. These are pharmaceuticals that I take on a regular basis, electively. And Deprenel, or selegiline as it's known in the US, has a rejuvenating effect on the neuroendocrine system. It resensitizes your hypothalamus, which improves the way your hypothalamic pituitary axis works in terms of regulating your hormones at the top level. And when this is given to animals, they live longer. And not only do they live longer, but they are, for example, sexually active all the way into their later years, which indicates that it's not just living longer and being feeble, this is living longer and having zest for life. So I take it on a regular basis. And I've had all kinds of people who've talked about this for years, and you know, I still take a very low dose because I happen to be dopaminergically dominant, and Deprenyl raises dopamine levels. So if you're getting older and you're losing the zip in life, your libido is crashing, you're not as passionate about things, you tend to be more apathetic, Deprenyl is a good candidate drug for that because it raises dopamine levels, which is, in a sense, the juice of the limbic system in terms of drive and assertiveness and competitiveness, and it's about, you know, going out and doing what you want to do to the best of your ability. The opposing neurotransmitter, which is serotonin, which is equally valuable and something that I also cultivate, but I do it 12 hours out of phase from the dopamine. That's involved in peacefulness and sleep and tranquility and emotional stability, all of which are really wonderful characteristics to have. But so the ideal, you know, state of health has to do with a kind of circadian variation where during the day your dopamine is higher and you're well driven, and then at night your dopamine is higher, so you're sleeping very deeply. And creating that kind of rhythm is one of the reasons that I, you know, take Deprenyl in the morning and use tryptophan in the evening. Tryptophan is a serotonin precursor. Dopamine is a dopamine, Deprenyl is a dopamine agonist. There are also other ways of raising dopamine involving nutrients. So you could have, for example, fava beans for breakfast and raise your dopamine that way.
Any other food suggestions besides fava beans?
Well, in terms of dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is relatively stable. So dopamine is like the baseline for how people function. And it's not like it bounces around a lot. But serotonin does change dramatically depending upon circumstances. And so between the daytime and the nighttime, you will see in your brain different levels of serotonin dominance. And but there's another effect that happens to serotonin that is related to inflammation. So this is why your sleep turns out to be one of the most important health measures that you can pay attention to, because anytime you have inflammation in your body turns on an enzyme called indoleamine dioxygenase, IDO, and it trashes your tryptophan. This is to protect you against infections. But what it does is it sabotages your sleep, it sabotages your peacefulness, it makes you edgy and irritable, and that's okay if you're going to have a fever for a day or two and maybe a week. But if you have chronic inflammation that goes on for months and years, this is a serious problem. And not only do you have sleep deprivation issues that can accumulate, but you can also have deferred healing that builds and builds and builds over time, because when you're not getting into the deep stages of sleep, you're not only not doing the growth hormone thing, which is the neuroendocrine message to your body and melatonin to sleep, but the alkaline state of sleep does not happen, and therefore the mechanisms of healing don't get activated.
In fact, it was LaValle 2-3 months ago talking about nutrition, but he ended always with, if you don't get the sleep, forget the nutrition. You have to get the sleep. You have to get the sleep. That's the most important nutrient, so to speak. Anyone else have a question? We are actually having a little bit of computer problem. Someone's gone and run and gotten a different computer. We're waiting for it to come back, so we need questions.
Hi, thanks. I have a client who has a 6-year-old boy who has a germoid cyst on his eyebrow, and they want to remove it surgically if it grows into the eye bone, and the mother doesn't want to do that. He's had it since he was born, and he's also developing this bunion, almost a deformity on the foot. And his aunt, who is 55 years old, was born with this bunion as well, and they're now telling her it was arthritis. She's 55 and has had this bunion that's deformed her foot. But the boy who's 6 years old is developing the same type of bunion and deformity that the aunt has, but the mother's more concerned about the eyebrow right now, this cyst, and wanting to know if there's anything she can do alternatively instead of surgically removing it.
Well, I was just telling her that I would try first before surgery. I had a woman from Connecticut, she had basal cell carcinoma, and was talking to a friend of mine, and we decided to try 35% hydrogen peroxide with a Q-tip and just tap it enough to whiten that area. Within less than a month, her basal cell carcinoma was gone, not only in hers, but her best friend, and they were ready to have. So I would do that first. It's going to sting a little bit, but it is a miraculous thing. I've seen it take moles, I've seen it remove warts, etc. But we've had 2 people with basal cell carcinoma that were ready for surgery, and they did the 35% hydrogen peroxide. Food grade.
And a hint, where can you get 35% food grade hydrogen peroxide? Well, you can also get it at pet stores because the fish have to have perfectly clean aquariums, and so they use it, and it's Health by Heidi. It is food grade. It is absolutely food grade, or the fish die. It is made for humans, so that happens to be an easy source because there are a lot of pet stores around. But you have to be very, very careful with 35% hydrogen peroxide. It will burn you immediately. You can't wash it off. It will burn. So be careful.
Also, in answer to that, I've used tea tree oil in bandages before to have a significant effect on skin lesions of various different kinds. And I even had an instance where I'd been bitten by a tick. And I soaked a pad in tea tree oil and left it on for about 24 hours. And ended up having a circular bullseye ring show up on the pad where the tea tree had been. So I'm pretty sure it affected quite a change. Tea tree is quite dramatic if you keep it soaked.
So, Dr. Taylor is here next month, Dr. D, and you know he's the expert when it comes to any kind of skin issues like that, and he has removed many, many cysts on the most awkward places you can think of. So I really would consult him first. What he does is no dermatologist would do. So it's not surgical.
And it doesn't leave scars. For a 7-year-old child, that might be important because that will grow. One other?
Vern, does hydrogen peroxide work on sebaceous cyst, you think?
Yeah, if you want, you can also use a little bit of still water and tap it on there. And it gets wound healing. It has a
Tremendous wound healing mechanism like Manuka honey. You know, one of the byproducts of Manuka honey, the oil actually is hydrogen peroxide. And we use it when I was in the hospital. We use it for cleaning burns, you know, even cuts, like severe cuts. If you put it on there and just tap it and hold on to it, it cleans it out and actually starts wound healing mechanism immediately.
There's actually an FDA-approved Medi honey
Yeah.
that has the
Microphone, please.
Well, I didn't know if he was going to continue talking. There's also a product called Medi honey. You can buy in tubes, and to be used to heal skin problems very effectively. Raw organic honey. You can also just buy it.
Yeah.
Manuka honey is, of course, is from a tree down in Australia, and New Zealand, thank you. It has particular properties, but raw honey will do it also, in general.
Let me add another emphasis on the warning about 35% hydrogen peroxide. This is 10 times more powerful than the peroxide you buy in a drugstore.
Yeah.
It is exceedingly dangerous. That if you think that a small dose that might be safe would be a drop, you're off by potentially a factor of 10. A drop can burn a hole in your skin and produce a scar. So you're talking about very, very tiny amounts. So when we're talking about treating something like that at home, start with the tiniest possible dose, and if you don't get a reaction, you can always increase it tomorrow. But once you burned a hole in your arm, you can't unburn it. So be very, very gentle and very respectful. 35% hydrogen peroxide is half the strength of rocket fuel.
Get the hint?
I've had excellent success with certain patients with a stem cell product called J Bioserum. I've seen it on multiple skin lesions literally evaporate, warts that were raised maybe an inch or so, well, half an inch off the skin, just things that I would not believe. I've seen patients that have gotten different cysts and things removed surgically. They've grown back, and the serum has literally taken it off even after it's grown back. It's about $200 retail to get some stem cell factors. It's not cheap, but it's definitely worth a try. It should be in everyone's medicine cabinet for burns and such as well.
What's the name? Great anti-cancer tool. Yes.
What is the name?
The name and the name, slowly.
The name is J Bioserum. If you Google it,
J, like
yeah,
the letter
J-A-Y, bio then serum.
J Bioserum, I think. Yes, does anyone, are you going to address this or another question?
Something else.
We have a question here and then.
We're gonna start calling you Vanessa.
I was just curious if people had some good ideas for eczema or skin irritation.
Any takers? Yeah.
My neighbor who's a physician, he had a patient that had very, very bad eczema, and he went to Washington State where there's a lot of moisture, and he said it all cleared up. So I noticed when I went to Hawaii, my dermatitis cleared up totally. So it's probably coming back, but the point is when I was there, it was gone.
Okay. What?
One over here.
My son was having eczema on the same spot for, I don't know, probably 2 years, and it was related with the yeast in the gut and some, inflammation and lot of allergies. But I started using self-food, liquid oxygen, and actually after that disappeared. Even he used to have a scar from that eczema because he was scratching and doing all kind of things. That helped a lot. Usually for the people it's 8 drops 3 times per day, but for the child I did a half or whatever, 1 dose per day.
Vitamin C, of course. Anyone? And sea buckthorn oil. Oil of sea, and it's bright red, it's beautiful.
Question unrelated to skin. Does anybody have any input on Nikan mattresses and electromagnetic mattresses?
Do you want to?
She does.
Well,
Kind of mattress?
Nikon.
Well, Nikon is interesting. They were working with us in 1984, 85 in Los Angeles. And at that time, we developed with a guy named Brout a magnetic field which is identical to what Dean Bonley is making today. And I would recommend Dean Bonley over anybody else today with his magnetic pads. Dean is the only one that took it to another level, and he actually, what he did, he put one polarity on one side of the bed, all closely together, because you don't want any interface between another magnetic field. And the key is when you're sleeping, one of the things we learned way back in the 80s doing some research is the magnetic field on the ground was the north field coming through the ground, and then the positive field was coming from the cosmic, from the universe. So the whole theory at that time Nikon was looking at is developing that kind of beds, but what they did was they put positive, negative, and they didn't look at how the harmonics of the body works at night when you're sleeping. And Dean Bonley is by far the best bed. There's nobody even closer. We did a lot of research with that.
How do you spell his last name?
B-O-N-I, hold on, Dean Bonley, it's B-O-N-I-E-L-I, no. How does he spell? B-O-N-I-E-L-I-E? Yeah. Dean is, it's called Magnetico. And he studied with, Dean actually studied with us in the 80s and 90s with our engineer. And our engineer worked up at the University of Vancouver, and he also worked at several other universities in Canada. And that's where Dean was learning. He was a dentist up there.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Does anyone have any experience dissolving large calcium-based kidney stones?
That's the
I've tried
projector.
just about everything. I'm just looking for some
Well,
phototropic agent and see if anyone has any successful experience.
First thing we
There's lots
could
of
do-
literature about dissolving small ones, but not much about dissolving ones that are greater than 8 to 10 millimeters.
Let's see. Okay, you get past them.
Any takers? Big kidney stones, Bill.
Magnesium. Len Saputa worked on one of my patients with, he had, every year he would have severe kidney stones. And Len Saputa and I had this one patient, and we put him on magnesium, and it's now 3 years he hasn't had any kidney stones. Just magnesium citrate was the best. We found that one worked the best. So you take about 400 to 500 milligrams of magnesium in the morning and in the afternoon and evening, and then you can do it twice a day. It works. And even Epsom salt. One of my other patients couldn't afford it, so we put him on Epsom salt, and he drank a couple teaspoons every day throughout the day, and he hasn't had a kidney stone in over 12 months now.
Dissolve it.
It dissolves it.
You dissolve the Epsom salt in water and chug it.
There's a herb, I can't remember the actual name of it, but it's commonly called royal breakstone. It's an herb from South America, and it actually got its name from helping to break up kidney and gallstones. There's also a apple pectin or pectin from grapes will help to soften the kidney stone. And so I really recommend whatever method you're using to use a lot of apple pectin or grape pectin. You can actually buy powdered pectin from the wine industry and that kind of thing. And also along with the citrate, lemons are very, very good. And in fact, the whole lemon with the rind and everything, which has a lot of D-limonene. You can make lemonade in a good, high-speed blender and just put the whole lemon in there. So those are some other suggestions.
It'll also clean your gallbladder.
I would suggest that there are two issues that you might want to look at. One, having to do with the issue of calcification versus ossification processes in the body, where calcium goes into your soft tissues instead of your bones. And that relates to too much calcium supplementation, too little magnesium supplementation, and low levels of vitamin D. Just to give you the three biggest players in that kind of area. So if you've got a situation where your body is calcifying your soft tissues on a pathological level, then you may be forming new stones all the time, and the stones that you have may be getting bigger. The other thing that I'd like to raise is the question of what's causing the stones, and there are plenty of people who are arguing that it's not just a mineral imbalance, that it has to do with a calcification reaction to an infection, and that it's a microbe that will culture on the stone, and then when your immune system targets it, will develop a calcification defense against your immune system, which accretes calcium on top of the stone. And so you may want to look at infectious process and do, for example, a microbiome assay of your urine to see if you can identify if there's something in your kidneys and whatever that is living there that's causing the problem, and then go after that.
Great, Steve, thank you. I think we're making headway. Not quite. Any other questions tonight? I think we might be ready to at least make announcements, right? Okay. Go for it. I just want to be sure we're not. All right, so let me talk about future evenings and events in September. There'll be a panel discussion on nutrition with Dr. Tel Oren, myself, and Christine Roche. In October, Stephen Blake will talk about arthritis and natural ways to heal arthritis and keep your joints young. And Raymond Francis will be the second speaker, talking about why aging is a mistake. And then in November, Dr. Debra Davis will discuss EMFs, EMR, electromagnetic radiation, and the title of her talk is Disconnect Cell Phones and Industrial Response.
I made it up. She might
Okay.
take it.
Whatever.
She might also talk on cancer because she's got a book out.
Okay, and then you need to know that the Foundation of Mind Being Research meeting takes place this Friday, August 23rd at 7:30. The speaker is Suzanne Taylor, who'll be talking about crop circles. And you can get more information for that at www.fmbr.org.